louder. When we were little, and my father used to get us up, and he wouldn't sleep the night before. He'd be so nervous about driving the car up north because it was a 9-hour ride by car.
On a good day.
That's Mary Ellen talking on a good day. Anyhow, he wanted to leave the house by 3 o'clock in the morning so he could hit the ferry at the exact time. They left every other hour or something. And so we were all up. We used to have a trunk in the back seat, and my mother packed enough clothes for us to stay up there for the summer. Yeah, and I don't know still to this day where she ever put her knees because there were 5 of us, 7 of us in the car.
Yes, there was a running board too.
Yeah, and then there were suitcases along the running board with a grate across it, a gate across it to hold them on. Anyhow, we'd start out at 3 o'clock in the morning from Flint, and if we were
got gas in West Branch.
First stop was West Branch to regas. My dad would run in and get a glass of beer, run us out a bottle of pop, and want us to drink it. And want us to drink it in a hurry because we had to be on the road. So we got to the Straits, and if we happened to miss the ferry, that meant we had to wait till the next one came. And then they would sell. There were seagulls all over the place because the people would feed them while they were waiting to get on the ferry. And they would smoke salmon and smoke this and smoke that they were selling at the car windows. Anyhow, when the ferry came in, then it would take an hour to load all the cars on the ferry because, well, yeah, it was a good size because they must have at least, I think 150 cars. It sounds like a lot, but could have been. Anyhow, so by the time they loaded all the cars in, they had to direct you in because they had to get them close together. And then it took 1 hour to cross the ferry, to cross the water. And then it would take another hour to unload the cars. And beyond that, when we got to the Upper Peninsula, the other side of the Straits, we weren't even halfway up to Atlantic Mine.
Atlantic Mine is where the house was?
Yes, Atlantic Mine was the home where my father was raised, and let's see, in Atlantic Mine there would be Aunt Mamie and Uncle Jack, who were the oldest of the Hanley family. Grandma Hanley was married to a Mr. Harrington first. Her maiden name was Kelly. Her name was, what's her name? Oh no, you're talking about Grandma Hanley now. I'm talking about Grandma Hanley. I'm talking about great Grandma Hanley. Your great grandma, yes. She married she came over as Sullivan. What was her first name? I can't think now. Great grandma Sullivan. Ellen Sullivan. And she came over and she married Mr. Harrington. I never knew if she married him before they left Ireland, but I think she was younger. Anyhow, she married Harrington, and she had 4 children. And one was named Con, one was Julia, one was Annie, and there was another girl. Con, he had some kind of eye problem. I think it was cataract or something. And when you want to give your version of it or my version? Okay. Anyhow, they operated on his eye, and the scalpel or whatever they used slipped, and he was blind. And so he always, he was there in the house, and even though he was blind, he would scrub the floors almost every day. He chopped the wood and for the wood stove in Atlantic Mine, and they had a wood stove. And I think great Grandma Hanley, for you people, she opened like a little sheebeen, which in Ireland they sell liquor out of the house or drinks out of the house at the beginning in the parlor. She had these...
Is that how the family bar started?
Yes, and she would keep her change in little cups. I'm not sure how much English she spoke, but she would keep dimes and nickels and pennies. And this continued even after her and Jack, who was a part of the Hanley family. Anyhow, we'll get back to the Kellys. And then Aunt Julia was there, and she would make the beds and do all that kind of stuff. Well, her eyesight got very bad, and she was putting stove in the wood stove one day, and her apron caught fire, and she burned to death. And on the floor of the kitchen, you could see her outline when we came out there. So that, and then the other Harrington, the other children she had by Harrington was Annie was the oldest one, and that is where Mary from Lawrence came from. And Jack Harrington was Annie's son, who taught at the college in
Mary from Lawrence is your
cousin. She would be my father's niece, step-niece. Anyhow, they were very bright, the Harringtons from Lawrence. They were very bright, and they lived up in Iron Mountain, I believe. And Jack would walk from Atlantic Mine down to Houghton Mining School every day to go to until he got his education, and he ended up being head of the math department at Houghton Mining School.
That's one Michigan Tech now?
Michigan Tech, now known as Michigan Tech. Let's see, how'd that go? So anyhow, there was another girl in that family. For some reason, she ran away, and so she was lost. No one knew anything about her. And I don't even recall them saying her name. Mary from Lawrence, which was Jack's sister, she taught school for 40 years in Lawrence, Michigan, and she never married. She took care of her mother Annie, and her father. It's strange because she married. That's where the Harrington name came in. So Dan died first, I believe. There's Mary and Frances, and they had a big family. Mary and Jack and Frances and Emmett, and Annie had a lot of children. Anyhow, one of her children, Frances, he ended up going to West Virginia. He was a mining engineer, and he took some of his brothers down there to work for him. And the day one of them was to retire, or going back to Lawrence, he went down to say goodbye to his friends, and he died. He had a cave-in, and he never made it back home again. Yeah, he went down to the mines to say, say goodbye, and so that was on my sister Helen's birthday, Marilyn says. I was born. That was a sad thing. They had a tough time in Iron Mountain, raising that family, because I don't think Dan Harrington was too reliable of a worker. But Jack said, that's the oldest brother who was a professor, said, well, we may not have money, but we all got brains. And it turned out that's exactly what happened. They all did well. So Mary was in Lawrence, and she used to come home from teaching school at lunchtime to feed her mother. Took care of her. Annie lived a long time. So that's where that came from. To get back to the Harrington family, she had these 4 children, Grandma Hanley did, and by this time she not only had a little parlor sheeping, but she also had she would take in people all the time. Yes, especially boarders, especially people who just arrived from Ireland. And they would stay with her until they got stabilized, and a lot of them went to Chicago. And I think that's where the McCarthys or someone, but I really can't remember that. But I know that that was the place to go to when they arrived from Ireland. And probably a lot of them couldn't even speak English. I don't know. Anyhow, one of her boarders turned out to be Hanley. And Harrington died, and I don't know how. And she was left with her with the 4 children. That would be my grandfather. That would be my dad's father. That would be Grandpa Hanley's father. So she ended up marrying the boarder, and I believe someone mentioned that he was younger than her.
So Hanley, your grandfather, married Harrington. We had Mike.
Wait, no, let's back up. Grandma came over, as I said, my grandma came over, not your grandma, my grandma. So anyhow, when she was left a widow with the Harrington children, and so Hanley was a boarder in the house, and she married him. Now my understanding is that he was somewhat younger than her. I don't think he was very good looking. He always dressed. I don't know. I don't think he was a hard worker. I think Grandma Hanley ran the show. Let's see. So then with Hanley, man, she was almost pregnant every 9 months. She had Jack was the oldest, then Mamie was next, and then Pat, my dad Mike, and Aunt Margaret, and then Tim. So how many is that? 7?
More than a handful.
Right. Okay. So anyhow, plus the four Harrington children that she had by the first marriage.
So the youngest and the oldest between hers and theirs was
Probably not too much, I wouldn't think.
10, 15 years.
Well, I wouldn't even think that much. Between Mamie and Jack, and because Con, there must have been very little when Harrington died. I don't know what he died from. Anyhow, so my grandma didn't want anyone. She was, they say they cry when you get married and they celebrate when you die. Irish, they'll never let you leave home. And so Jack and Mamie, because of the older family, and then his grandma there, neither one of them ever married, Jack and Mamie, and they were the two oldest, and they really raised the rest of the family. Jack, understand that he really liked a girl in California or somewhere that had left Atlantic Mine, and so they really bribed them not to go, to stay home on the business, which he did. The little she-bees, by then they probably had some kind of a bar attached to the house to begin with. They added onto the house and they had a bar. Let's see, anyhow, Jack had, he really liked this girl, but it never happened. And then Mamie, someone wanted to marry her, and they promised her all sorts of diamonds and stuff that she wouldn't marry. She took the diamonds, and so they were like the head of the house. In fact, when I was little, I said to my dad, how come Aunt Mamie and Uncle Jack don't sleep together?
What answer did you get?
Well, they're brother and sister. And so anyway, I couldn't remember vaguely Grandma Hanley. She was very old at the time I was little.
Where does your dad fit in group order?
Okay, let's repeat that. There was Jack and Mamie and Pat and Dad and Margaret and Tim. Six, Tim. But so Dad was about fourth down. Yeah, right. Pat and Mike. It's a long time I didn't know she was Pat and Mike. Anyhow, let's see what happened. So as the family grew, they somehow had enough money to add a bar onto the house. And above the house, above the bar was the second floor. And in the second floor, they almost had like cots for beds. Now this was when my dad, he must have been not little, young. I mean, positioned. Yeah, I would think so. And they built it, and it was a regular bar. It was the full length of the side downstairs, of mirrors and a regular bar. And they even had a pool table in there because I remember I used to go tap dance on it when I was a kid in front of the mirrors behind the bar by myself.
When did you start going up there?
Well, I don't know. Probably when we were out of diapers. I don't know. Anyhow, my mother stayed a couple of summers with us, but she didn't like going up there because she said they're all too negative. Anyhow, so let's go back to where were we with? They built the bar on, and then the guys all worked. I mean, when you came home from Ireland, your wealth was in your children because they did the work. And so by the time they built the bar, they had these cots up on the second floor where all these boys slept, and anyone should have them to take in, I guess, and everyone, So my mother used to worry, and this must have been at the time that my mother knew my dad because she was always afraid that someone would go into that bar and shoot up through the ceiling, and kill somebody in the bed. That Pat was in the service, and he came home, and he died. He never married. Mary Ellen was his favorite. He liked Mary Ellen.
He died of cancer in Mayo.
I think he turned jaundice, and Mary Ellen said he died with cancer.
Your mother and dad married yet?
No.
Okay.
Well, he was married by the time Pat died. Yeah, he was married. They were done.
You had Mike on Hanley in the 60s.
No. Anyhow,
I think Mike, your dad, Pat, and Grandpa Hanley drove to Mayo's when Uncle Pat was dying.
oh, okay. But Dad was married at the time, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Mike was in grade school. There was two who went to Mayo's.
I don't remember Uncle Pat very much. In fact, they said he was the quietest one of all, but I don't know who could be quieter than my dad was.
Oh, he was. He never talked.
Well, anyhow, I like Mary Ellen. She was, maybe Mary Ellen was the youngest at the time. No, I remember when he died. Jacob. Anyhow, sorry, go from here. So the bar was there. Well, eventually they must have built the bar across the street, or it was an empty building, or what. But that was the big. That was the big.
It was the family business.
That was the family business. And Tim, let's see. Then my dad met my mother. My mother lived in Painesville, and then she lived in South Range.
In Tri-Mouth, and he used to walk. He used to go dancing.
My understanding is that my mother lived in South Range, which is down from Atlantic Mine. It's quite a few miles. And my dad used to go down and take her to the show, and used to leave his snowshoes against the building, or the house, wherever she was, and they would go to the show, and he would snowshoe back home to Atlantic Mine. And perhaps to the dances, as Mary Ellen said, I don't know.
Why didn't Grandpa Hanley, my grandpa, or your mother, get up to there?
She was raised up there. My grandpa, and in fact, my mother's side, her name was Schmidt. And she had a lot of sisters, and I'll get to her part after, but she married Roth, and he was really German. And they came over. Both German sides came over. Yeah, they went up north. I think because a lot of it, I don't know if it was mining or what brought him up there, but he was a butcher. And he was very irregular when he worked, too. Roth was a butcher. Grandma Smith had a lot of sisters, but let's go back to the Hanleys. I'll catch up with the Roths. So I can remember when upstairs they had in the Hanley house, the big Hanley house, when they had an attic, and anyhow, all I can remember is I went up there and there was one room and all these things were hanging on the wall, and I came down to my Uncle Jack and I said, I didn't know you played tennis, and they just got hilarious because they were snowshoes. I had never seen snowshoes before. So anyhow, my dad would go over and back and forth. But Grandma Hanley, but all I remember her is mainly she was a little lady at that time. Now our pictures show her to be a big lady.
She was little.
and she was a little thing, and she used to wear those
Tied-up shoes.
tied shoes, and he had that boot hook that used to pull to get them tight. And Tim would, and Uncle, your time. Uncle Con would get her up in the morning, and of course, if those, they didn't have chamber pot. They had indoor plumbing. They were the first one to have indoor plumbing in Atlantic Mine. I know that. But Grandma, I remember she still had a chamber pot under her bed. She was a very little old woman when we saw her. Where you go to the bathroom at night and then you throw it out in the outhouse. Or it's a little pot that has a handle on it.
Like you take use now.
Yeah, something like that. And then in the morning you flush it down if you have a toilet. And she was just then, she was, all I remember is very little. My Uncle Con used to spend a lot of time with her. I mean, he would help her get dressed in the morning. He would put her shoes on. Those were those high things with the, the up high boots.
Yeah.
I used to tell him I wish he'd come to Flint so he could tighten my ice skates.
That's cute.
And Grandma always said the rosary. And she always said it in Gaelic because she didn't think God could understand English.
That's cute. I can remember being in the bedroom next to her room. She had the big master bedroom at the end. And you would hear Con in there every night. They said the rosary together, as Morellen says in Gaelic.
She did it meals, too. They always prayed at every meal.
And while Dad was growing up, they said a rosary every night. Family rosary every night. Family together. So anyhow, so I do remember, that's really all I remember. And then they take her down, and my Aunt Mamie, how she ever found time, I'll never know. She used to have a really pretty flower garden. She would have all sorts of flowers in that garden. And that they had a chair down there, a wicker chair, and they would take Grandma Hanley down there and sit her in the sun. I remember Con sitting there visiting with her, and he treated her like a doll, that's all I could say. And he was the blind. So this is the blind uncle. That would be the boy from the first marriage.
Uncle Con was blind, and they would go to the grocery store and bring home canned goods, and he'd put all the canned goods away. And I don't know how he did it, but he knew.
Well, she would say, "What is this?" And she'd say tomatoes, or "What's this?"
And they sent him downstairs for canned goods, and he'd always come up with the right one. He never made a mistake.
And he used to still remember.
This is about as blind in one eye.
No, he was blind. He was even chopping wood when he was blind. He was
And you asked him anything about the Tigers baseball game, he knew everything about baseball.
And of course, this was pre-TV time, so I can remember they had a radio in the living room, I guess we call it, and then a dining
Type radio.
yeah, and then he would sit in the corner of the dining room, which was right around the corner, and he always wore a green shade over his eyes. We got a picture of him in the photograph album. And he would sit there and listen till he get his stuff done, and then he'd listen to Ma Perkins and all those
Gator thanks him.
Oh yeah, he's around the corner. And it was like his family. He could tell you, and they could hardly wait for the next episode, and so on and so forth. Let's see. So the grandma died. She died before. She was. I can't remember when she died. I must have been really little, but I did remember seeing Melvin in the guys.
Did they do school up here, or was the school something they did?
I don't think my dad graduated. I'm sure he didn't.
They had Jeffers, he and his wife were the teachers, and Aunt Mamie and another one were left-handed, and they tied their left hand behind their back to make them right-handed. They showed discipline to the kids.
All I know is that when they tied their hands to their side, that none of them, I could never read any of their writing. I tried to change them from being left-handed.
Oh, really?
And Mel and I are both left-handed. And,
Were your other
It's funny because John and Jennifer and Gallagher are both left-handed and both their kids are right-handed, so I don't know. My dad was right-handed, but there were left-handed in the family, and I'm left-handed. And I think twin Taft girls are left-handed. But anyhow, after time went on, and when I was teaching, I would just tell the left-hand kids when it came to handwriting, I put them in one row, and I just tell them to turn their paper the other way. So I didn't let anyone out of my class that tried to write upside down with their wrists all curved up. Anyhow, so where are we now?
You're growing up, and
we're up there in the summer, so
We go up in the
you started going up there when you were...
Well, I know my mother went a couple times, because the first time she wasn't going to go, I kind of laughed because I'm crying, I don't want to go. I don't want to leave home. I thought my mother, oh yeah. And they look forward to having it come.
Until we got John. I can remember one time it was Joyce's first time to stay up there. And Joyce had braids. So my mother taught me how to braid Joyce's hair. It took a whole month to teach me. Anyway, then I'd braid Joyce's hair till she was the blades I'd take it.
I'm very young, I didn't know that. She was always good.
So you started your trips?
So then we went
Were there trips before you were born?
all I know is the only one I ever heard was they went up, tried to go up to Thanksgiving one time for Thanksgiving.
We were going to surprise them. I don't know, I forget now why, but we were all going up to surprise them. They didn't tell them at the mind we were coming.
You're free to take.
We got to Newberry, and it was real icy. My dad slipped off the road, and the mechanic, the car, anyway, shipped us all back to his house. And we stayed there, and I think it was the oil pan or something was broke. He put that on, and we all turned around and came back. I know we stayed overnight at this mechanic's house.
I don't think I was born then, but anyhow.
Going up in your kid.
And then, let's see, where are we now?
Making your trip up.
Well,
Wednesday I stayed in the landing line, and I just went out and cut hay and hauled it in. Barbara thinks she'd go to Hummel. She was there. This is what I'm going to say to that Barbara.
So you go up there.
so anyhow, they had the bar, and they also had a farm that they hired people to do hay, and the hay. And I can remember.
They had cows, they had chickens, they had pigs.
Did your dad stay up there? This whole time, or just went out and took you up there, dropped you off? Get back to work?
My dad lived there until he was 28 or 29, and he came down to Flint and hired in as a dealer.
Okay.
And he and my mother eloped. And they were very happy about that because she was Lutheran. And my mother changed Catholic at the time.
Your mother and dad got married down here?
They eloped in Wisconsin. Grandma
They were living up there.
And then they went, well, Grandma Hanley had an aunt, her cousin in Duluth or someplace. Anyway, they went there and they got married. And
that was Grandpa Rodson's sister. Or
Hanley's aunt, her cousin.
Oh, my grandpa. You mean my mother?
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I'm Wisconsin. Anyhow, I'm going to veer a little bit. My mother's father was Catholic and married my grandma Rodson. She was Lutheran. They were very strong Lutheran. And so my mother changed Catholic for my dad. But she became the best Catholic of the family, but there was a real problem. on that marriage there because Grandma Hemmings did a rosary every night, and my grandma Rod, she was strong Lutheran, and in fact, she raised my mother and my Aunt Margaret and Catherine Lutheran. And I think there was big trouble. Well, my mother was intent on getting her dad back to the church. And so, I'm skipping again, way ahead. But this would be during the Depression. She got my grandfather back, my grandpa Rod, back into the church. And his penance was, because all his kids were raised Lutheran, Father Oates had him walk from Carton Street to St. Mike's every day for 6 months. I mean, it was a biggie every Sunday, whatever, but he had to walk. And so that was a big, much sooner my mother turned Catholic, too. Yeah, it was a real penance. And now you marry again and you don't get much penance. Anyhow, the kids, because there were no other children, no other, on my dad's side, no one had...
Aunt Margaret got married, so, yeah. My dad, they were the only three that got married.
Right.
The rest never got married.
No, there were Mamie and Jack, and Pat died.
Well, which one was the Carters or not?
Tim was good. Yeah. Uncle Tim and Aunt Margaret didn't have children. My dad had lots. So when we come up north, it was a big deal, and my Uncle Jack used to really spoil us at the bar that wasn't used as a bar anymore. He'd go down and he'd buy whole Nabisco boxes of cookies, about 6 different kinds, and he'd stick the boxes in the bar, and you could go and cookies all you want.
And they stopped using the bars anymore?
Well, they had built a new one across the street. That was just empty on the house. That was just another room on the house. But my Aunt Mamie, she was just awful the way she worked. They would bring over the bar towels for her to wash. She would feed the help at lunchtime every day out of wood stove. He would send the shifts of waitresses over. I mean, I used to get from across the street, time to go have your lunch. And some, I don't know how my Aunt Mamie did it. It was terrible.
She had a washing machine, and she used to...
And they used to have
heat the water to put in the washing machine.
They'd fill these big copper kettles. The con would fill them up, and they'd put them on the stove to boil the towels. And then she had a mangler, and she would mangle all the towels and iron them. It was awful. I mean, I don't know how she did it. She was up in the morning, and Con would get up and start the stove. Clyde, yeah, that's her half-brother. Starts the fire in the morning and made me great bread and cook. And how you do that, I don't know. So what happened? So then Tim, let's see, there was my dad came down, and his family, and my brother was the only male in the family to carry on the name. And
all were sisters.
All were in our house, our family. I'm talking about our family. Helen, Joyce, and all of me. Your father. And I remember going up there during the war, and they were just having a fit that Mike was in the war. Something happened to him, and that would have been the end, right? There was no Henry Flint. There were no Henry Flint. Anyhow, so when we would go up there when we were young, he'd let Mike go over to the bar, and...
what years did they let Mike?
Now we're back into high school, probably.
Is this like a 8-year window of time where you guys went up north?
I don't think it was that long. I don't really think it was that long. Because, when we started getting jobs, in Flint, we quit going up. When we were little, we all had a dog. They had 5 dogs. I remember mine was golf.
Uncle Tim had raised beagles.
Right. Anyhow, so Tim was kind of Tim was kind of a...
Yeah, he had beagles.
Our kid had 3 dogs.
Oh, really? Well, he had beagles, and anyhow, so he was going with Aunt Rose, and Aunt Rose was Swedish, and she lived in Lawrence, and she was a school teacher, and she was just the nicest person. And Jim got married. Jim married Rose, but they went together for 16 years.
I don't think he got married if it wasn't for Dad.
And my
marry her.
Get my down.
Yeah.
My dad told my mother, he went up there and he says, Tim's ruining that girl's life. So 16 years, but Tim was having women on the side and everything else. It was a trip.
What was I do?
But he couldn't, he never kept a job too very long. And Rose, you know, she's very staid and I frankly think the problem was about the marriage was he wasn't steady on a job and she
Just want to settle down.
no, she at that time, if you got married you couldn't teach school.
Oh.
So I would have been it. And I'm sure that's the reason that one of the reasons they didn't. And so she was living with her mother. She lived with her mother-in-law. The time I knew Rose, her father had died. And I kind of remember her mother. So anyhow, they did get married. And then Jim tried to get a job, and when he was a bachelor, he was down living with my dad for a while, because the reason I know that is because he's my godfather. Jim is my godfather. Uncle Jim is my godfather.
Everybody else, all your brothers and sisters have one of those relatives, godfather or godmother?
I have no idea.
I don't know.
I know Jim was my godfather, and Mrs. Brushy that lived across the street was my godmother. And so I know he was around our house for a while. Lived there.
Then he went up to Manistee and worked for the telephone company, and he fell off the telephone pole, broke his ankle, crushed his ankle. I
don't know about that, but then I know he was a bit cook. Then anyhow,
did any of those other than your dad come down to the States?
No.
Work?
No.
Tim finally he got end up. He had a car dealership in Menominee, and I think Rose had one brother who was in Africa, who was an engineer mining thing, and he spent his whole life in Africa because they had one daughter and they always had servants and everything. And, you know, it was the British. He worked for England. And he had a hard time getting his money back when he retired. And I remember meeting him and his daughter. And I think her brother financed that whole car deal. And I remember when Tim came up and told them Atlantic Mine. And lots of times, I don't know if she did it while we were there, only when we were there or not, but Margaret got married to John Harrington, and they had no children, and his mother and dad were both right from Ireland, and they had a cute little farm, and he used to get out of work at night and go down and see and make sure his folks were all right. And I think they lived almost into their 90s.
Up in Atlantic Mine or
No, this was Fort Hubble. Margaret and John got married. He was working for Calumet Hecla. That's the mining, that's copper mining. And he did a good job, I guess, Rose said. And they didn't have any children. And at night he'd come home and he would go down and check on his mother and dad in the next town down in Mason and bring back produce and all that stuff.
His car then, I assume, or not?
Yeah, he had a car, And then Margaret and him would drive up to Atlantic Mine almost every night and eat mainly supper. And it was just that. And I'm talking about 20, 30 miles. And Margaret was, what happened? They didn't have any children.
And Uncle John would come up on weekends. He'd bartend on Friday and Saturday night.
And my dad, when he went up there, he'd stay a week or two and he'd paint the whole inside of the house, outside the house. He was forever working when he would get up there. I don't think Jack knew how to do a brush or anyone else. Jim sure didn't. So my dad would really work up there the whole time.
He would work down here, too.
Oh, awful work down here. In fact, Uncle Gerald said when Dad retired, they had 2 men in the shop and Dad was good. Never saw a man work. But then my dad would come home and take care of the kids, fix the outside, work on the cars, go up north, into his shop. Well, he painted the whole time. He painted that house up in Atlantic Mine. Anyhow, I'm telling you that for some reason.
Uncle Jack was a politician. He ran for road commissioner, you ever go with them on the campaign? No.
You on the campaign trail with them, were you?
He'd go up and down the highway, and every group of men he'd stop and talk to. He was a politician. Yeah, he had the barn. Everybody in town. Then he had, they sold coal. And then the Depression hit, okay? And then, let's see what happened. And Mary's
guys were how old in the Depression?
I was born in July. The Depression hit in October, same year, 1929. That's all my dad needs was one more month. I was born in 27. You were 2 years. You were 2 years old now. I was just born.
Where's my dad fit in there?
Up above for Helen. Helen, there's Helen, me, Helen, your dad, and me. There's 5 years between your dad and me. 2 years between her and him. There's 2 years between Helen and Mike. There's 3 years between Mike and Mary Helen. There's 2 years between Helen and I. And there's 2 years between Joyce and I. So it's 2, 3, 2, 3. Anyhow, so Tim, good old Tim. So you were a landing mine, you worked. So Tim was bartending there for a while. And so Tim was, go ahead and answer. How about, what's that say? Some fellow well met, fair fellow well met.
Oh, I don't know.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. How are you doing today? Soccer.
Yeah, Tim loves to talk. Anyhow, he had a car sale. We had that car business. Anyhow, so prior to this time, Prohibition was on. Prohibition.
Oh.
It was after Prohibition. Because
was that through the bar?
Yeah, that was a trip. But as Barry from Lund says, let me tell you, they never starved up there at Atlantic Mines. They had the farm, they hauled coal, they had an ice house. You know, they made it through the Depression in mine shares. They never.
Ice house where they made it, or is that where they harvested it out of the lake?
I don't know where they got it hauled in, and then they had. I remember they had sawdust over it. They used to uncle pieces of it. I don't know. So anyway, after Prohibition, they got back. Jim must have been in between jobs or what. Not married yet, I'm sure. These guys came and it was Sunday and they came over and just give us a drink or whatever they did. So good old Tim did, and here they were, inspectors.
Oh.
So they closed the bar. Well, you talk about a funeral. They never got over that when Tim closed the bar.
The bar never opened up after that?
Oh, no, it opened. It reopened, but I guess they were back to cold hands. Whatever. So I never forgot that. That was.
The government shut them down.
Oh, yeah, it was Prohibition. Here you go. I don't know what the Prohibition was. That was great. It was after hours. After hours. Yeah, was that a Sunday, wasn't it? That's what Tim used to bartend, and then those friends would be there, and they'd drink till 6 o'clock in the morning. And they were demanding on that. He looked at me like everybody. Except he brought like the wrong ones that time. Our entertainment, when we were up there on Friday night, we'd all sit in the front window and watch the fighting. See who's going to knock.
Our fight?
Yeah. My dad would pull them out and hit them on the, and Uncle John would hit them a couple more times. They were, they had an outside porch around that house at that time. And they had these wicker chairs, and you could hear the music from the jukebox across the street. And they had a dance floor. And they had cars all the way up and down both sides of the street. They had a big business. And,
big smash.
well, see what it was. It was during the war. And all the people up around there went to Detroit to work. So they would go to Detroit on Monday. They'd all drive back up on Friday night, and then they'd drink. Then they'd leave Sunday afternoon to go back.
Wow.
They all wanted to come home for the weekend. So
actors to get down here to meet war weapons.
Yeah. So then they'd all go up there for the weekend, and they'd all get drunk, and then they'd start fighting. My dad would, the night, the time while he was up there, he would tend bar at night. And Margaret's husband
um, John Harrington. See, those are different Harringtons. There's the Harringtons from Lost that Aunt Annie married, first family, and then there was the Harrington and couple, Uncle John's parents. They've had no relation between those two, but they both happen to be Harringtons. Anyhow,
Uncle John Harrington, that Margaret's cousin, was about 6'3",
at least.
I don't think John here, not Aunt Margaret, but I know my aunt.
No, right.
Right.
He was about at least 6'3" and way over 200 pounds.
Really?
So when you saw him coming,
Big man.
somebody was coming.
So on the weekend, my dad would be at the bar, Jack would be at the bar, Uncle John would be, and like someone would, so Uncle John and my dad, they'd bounce them out of the bar, and then we'd sit on the porch, oh, they're going to get hurt, oh. Yeah, Margaret was going 6 to 9, and she didn't have any children. She was the music major. She played the piano, she had a nice voice, and
She had a baby grand piano in her living room. She never used. And suggested she give it to the school. Well, that was unheard of.
they wanted her to sing in the choir, but she wouldn't sing with untrained voices. She couldn't. So anyhow.
You there already? How much longer is it going to be?
Oh, we are almost there. Pit stop, coffee break, smoke break.
Oh, lovely.
Is that Red Bosley? Is she still up there?
That's good.
Sue?
I'm sorry, who? When?